Thank you for joining us today. Angus Downey, Head of Economic Research at EcoBank. As I said, when it comes to the local market on the day, the markets are pretty much moving towards new record highs on the day. It's a few seconds to go till the close of trade, and we are seeing those record highs. So we'll break down some of those drivers on the day. After the break, we'll also take a look at BHP Billiton's quarterly update. And of course, Richard Pike from Adcorp standing by to take us through their half-year results. Do stay tuned. Well, we've got Richard Pike in studio with me now. So there we go. We're going to shift focus. Rich, as I said, Adcorp's first half results came out today. Headline earnings per share up 13% to 127 cents. Revenue for the period increasing 41% to 4 billion rand. Richard, I introduced you. I thought we were going to break, but we are going to do that now. So let's look at the numbers. Of course, Byron Lotter joining us as well from Vestat. Richard, 41% increase there in revenue. Costs also increasing quite substantially. But if we had to break down the revenue versus, white collar versus blue collar, can you do that for us? Yeah,
I think the major contributor to such an increase in revenue is that we made an acquisition at the beginning of the year. In fact, it came in on the 1st of December in 2011. So that's obviously flattered the top line. That was Paracon. Paracon was a listed company. It's now subsequently delisted and forms quite a substantial part of the group. But that said, you mentioned our headline earnings per share up by 13%, what we call normalized earnings per share up about 7.5%. So we've had good organic growth in the business as well. We've contained our costs well. Our margins are in line with last year. That said, the lion's share of the business is our blue-collar business, and margins are up in that business.
When it comes to the white-collar business, 134% growth there. As you said, still blue-collar, which dominates. But what's causing this more than doubling in terms of earnings there?
Paracon comes the white-collar, very flattering. If you look at the balance of the white-collar business, in fact, it was relatively static. On the contracting side, on the permanent recruitment side, it was actually quite buoyant. And I think that comes down to our position. It's not a particularly buoyant jobs market overall, but I think our positioning has been quite good. We have quite a good focus on IT professionals, the placement thereof, also engineers and the like, and that's been quite buoyant. Also, if you look at our contracting businesses, we've gained market share. There's been a rationalization in the industry, and we expect that to continue for the next couple of years.
Byron, let's bring you into the conversation. I'm sure you've got some questions for Richard. Firstly, what are your thoughts on the numbers?
Yeah, they look good. Interesting to see how the big labour issues in South Africa can affect them in a positive way. Obviously, most companies out there not looking to contract workers full-time and look at the temp hiring. As far as the question is concerned, I'm not going to go the usual way and ask you about legislation and stuff. I'm going to ask you about Alan Sharp. I'm quite a big fan of his, and I enjoy what he says. But he's very much visible in the media and very outspoken. You don't think that might make you some enemies in the wrong places and cause a bit of spotlight on the company that you might not want?
I must say, in terms of spotlights, unfortunately, we found ourselves in the spotlight for better or worse, and that probably happened about 2 years ago with the whole labour broking debate. Kasatu took up the mantle and tried to have our industry banned for their own purposes, and they vilified us. If you look at some of the headlines from that period, they were fairly derogatory, and we had to respond and defend ourselves and defend our position. And I think we've done that. We are in the spotlight for better or worse, and then overlay, you have issues like Marikana, which propels us further into the spotlight. If I had my choice, I'd rather be less in the spotlight. And, hopefully, I think if you look at the labour breaking issue, it is being resolved. There's legislation now in front of Parliament, which is likely to be promulgated. I think that probably will take a lesser prominence if we can. But unfortunately, we're in a very sort of emotive type of industry at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And when you bring up the whole issue of labour broking, of course, it raises the whole issue around temporary contract work versus full-time work. What are the trends that you're seeing right now with regards to companies, and how's your company positioned when it comes to those two areas?
Yeah, interestingly, with all of the trouble we're seeing in terms of industrial relations, I would argue that industrial relations between employer and employee have never been worse. That's good for our business, and you see that reflected in our numbers. Our demand is fantastic. If you look at our blue-collar business, our EBITDA number, and that's all organic, grew by 31%. And that is, I think, a direct consequence of people not want to make the permanent hire decisions, as you mentioned, and utilising contractors. But I think there's a grave negative side to it as far as the country is concerned. And not only are they using contractors, that's a sort of temporary step. Automating, they're mechanising, they're offshoring, and definitely what we're seeing right now in our South African economy is mitigating against jobs, whereas it should be the number one priority. And you don't see any action on behalf of government that would suggest that they're taking this seriously.
Before I let you go, very quickly, the relationship with Randstad, how's it going to be deleveraged? I mean, what type of potential do you see coming through when it comes to that relationship, of course, globally recognized?
Yeah, what you're finding as a trend in South Africa and globally is you're finding people are rationalizing the number of suppliers they have of people resources, and so they're tending to sign sort of global contracts either on a multinational basis or in South Africa on a South African basis. And we've tied up an alliance with Randstad, who are the second biggest resourcing company in the world, and we will be the African representatives, and we've already had referrals of work from them. And I think it's a very exciting development for us, because that's the way the world is going. And, we are the biggest in South Africa, so for them, I think it gets in this geography, and it enables them to boast that they have a global footprint, including Africa.
Well, thank you so much for coming through. Richard Pike, CEO of Adcorp. After the break, we'll continue our markets discussion with Byron. Do stay tuned.